Everything we know, from people and ants to stars and galaxies to quarks and atoms, the entire universe, might just be a simulation running inside a supercomputer inside an even bigger universe. Ancient philosophers said that the universe is a dream that we're waiting to wake up from. In this dream world of the imagination, anything is possible. All cultural items, from the dreams of our rodent-like ancestors, to books, to television shows, are merely permutations of the reality we think we live in. Today's age of computers and video games places simulations at the center of our cultural consciousness. A select group of us perform simulations for fun and profit, and we call them games, role-playing and otherwise. We live to run simulations. Join us on the Simulationist podcast as we explore our culture of simulations.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Simulationist podcast. We're recording on the 31st of May, 2015, and this is the 143rd iteration of the show. My name is Josh Trelevin. With me, as always, on the other microphone,
Ryan Kirkby, co-host extraordinaire.
There's Ryan. Hey, Ryan.
How goes?
Oh, it goes good. Yeah, it's all good. Nice.
Beautiful sunny week.
Yeah, nice.
Well,
weather.
not rainy week, which,
Sunny Victoria, British Columbia.
We're sorry if wherever you are it's raining and horrible right now, but not really sorry. Not enough to do anything about it, at least.
Actually, May is probably a good month in a lot of places, so I think most people are probably doing well right now.
Well, at least in the northern hemisphere.
Well, I guess,
you do have the winter in the southern hemisphere.
Yeah, and then I think it's flooding in, Texas or something.
I've seen some stuff from some friends of mine that live down in the area. Flood warnings, lots of downpour. One more reason to come up with a weather control device. Let's face it, there's some bad weather going on in a lot of places, and if we were to all have our own weather generators, maybe we could fix things out. Because the problem is always oh no, you control the weather in the one area, and then it'll make horrible storms elsewhere. It's no, not if you keep our overlap going on right.
That's true. That could probably solve climate change too. If you pumped enough clouds into the atmosphere, that would actually...
Yeah, but knowing America, most of their, their climate control stuff, to maintain the weather would be fossil fuel powered, which just means when it finally, stops, it's going to be even worse happening. It also wouldn't stop the flooding from the melting of the ice caps.
Yeah. Well, now, is water vapor, is it the opposite of greenhouse gas? Because when it's in cloud form, it reflects sunlight away?
It does reflect sunlight away. It also holds in a lot of energy compared to other compounds.
Okay.
And that's why you can get things like tornadoes happening in the atmosphere. It's there's a lot of energy being stored in the stratosphere. So maybe what we should also be doing is finding some sort of lightning rod that just sucks a lot of this heat energy out of the atmosphere so that we don't have these big tornadoes. They just oh no, we've just, instead of having oil derricks out in the Gulf of Mexico, instead you've got a lot of heat absorbers in there, and they convert that into electrical energy and pump that over to the mainland United States, and then bam, the worst you get is just some nasty rainfalls, no tornadoes going up Tornado Alley.
Okay, well that sounds just crazy enough to work. No, I
don't believe it does sound crazy enough to work.
I think it would be a very large-scale operation, and I'm not sure if that heat energy wouldn't just be released again when you use it in, your whatever application.
I am speaking in very broad strokes. I have very little mechanical aptitude to make this conversion work.
Well, if one of our listeners has a degree in engineering...
You could be the best mad scientist on Earth. I shall capture the heat from the atmosphere, and I shall make it into cheap electricity for everybody and prevent tornadoes from ravaging the continent. And then, who's going to stop you? No one, because you're helping everyone. So, sometimes you can be a good mad scientist. You just got to be crazy enough to make it work.
Yeah. Well, maybe we should talk about what simulations, video games, comics, books, movies we've been consuming this week. What simulations have we been running in our brains via various media?
So, how about you then, Josh? Let's start with you. What have you been up to?
Oh, okay. Well, I just hyped it a lot, and it's just basically more Minecraft. little bit of Don't Starve, the game, Don't Starve. I've been playing the Librarian. I think I was playing the Librarian last time, too, so...
The added recipes are a nice bonus.
Yeah, more of the same of that. I set the game to longer summers, shorter winters. And
easy mode.
It's kind of easy, yeah. It makes it easier, but I think...
Well, you got to start somewhere. You can't start at hard mode and expect to get very far. You got to build up.
That's true, yeah. I'm still basically on the surface, but I'm just about ready to do like some, because they have like a dungeon level, like where you go underground and you explore under,
Don't starve in the dungeon.
Yeah, so I'm about to do that, but I haven't actually done that yet. Done a little bit of Don't Starve. I don't know if this counts as a simulation, but I also did another open mic on Wednesday.
Very nice.
Didn't go that well, but that's all right. I'm going to try again.
That's okay. I'm pretty certain all the greats didn't start off with a super hit as soon as they walked up on there.
Yeah, that's true. And I got a comic book from my uncle, which is called The Helm. Here, I'll pass it over so you can have a look at it, because I have it here.
The Helm by Jim Hardison, Bart Sears, and Randy Elliott.
It is a comedic title. It's a short one. It initially came out as just 4 little books.
You got the trade paperback.
And this is, the trade paperback collection of the 4 series. I really enjoyed it. I didn't know about this one at all. It's just a little one-off title, but it's about a guy who's like kind of a middle-aged guy with nothing going on for his life, and he gets fired from his job, and his girlfriend breaks up with him. He finds a magic helmet which talks to him, and it says he's the chosen one. This is not a spoiler yet, because that's in the beginning, and it's on the
back cover.
Back of the cover, and then it says the helmet says, "Wait a minute, I was mistaken. You're not the chosen one," because he's like a big dumpy fat guy, and but then he's like, "No way, I'm not, letting this opportunity pass." So then he becomes a hero, and he like fights demons and stuff. So,
well, it sounds almost like one of those war movies where the guys are training, and stuff, and it's like, "Wow, why don't you quit?" And the guy's like, "I've got nowhere else to go."
Yeah.
So done right, you could really be like, like he's had everything happen to him, like he's lost it all. All he has is this magical helmet. The magical helmet hates him, but he's got nothing else to go to. He's got nowhere else to run. All he's got is that helmet. So he steps up and becomes the man the helmet needs him to be.
Yeah, that's true.
But apparently it's a comedic title, so he probably doesn't step up like that.
Well, at
least not to the full dramatic sense I'm describing.
Maybe I should lend you or something. I read it, and it's very I don't know why it is with comics, but it's very compact, and it's so in some ways.
Well, it's a physical comic. Every page is it costs money to print out.
That's true, and to me the story feels rushed a little bit. It feels like now I got, which is I think it's part of the comedy. It's like we're telling this epic tale that you've heard a million times in other various other formats, but now it's involving this guy who works in a video store or doesn't anymore.
Used to. Well, that's okay. given the state of the industry, there's not a lot of video stores anymore.
Yeah, that's true. Kind of dates the book a little bit, I guess. But yeah, it basically rushes through the hero's journey for him. And it's like, oh, now this happens, now this happens, now this part happens, now this part happens. So it's very fast.
Well, that is a hallmark of the comedic action sort of style. If everyone had time to sit down and talk things out, most comedic plots wouldn't get anywhere near as far, for a ball rolling as they do.
Yeah, and I guess compared to some of the comic books that I have had the the opportunity to read, some of them are very slow paced in that you buy
the decompression stuff,
an issue of whatever comic, and you read through it and what happened? Oh, he encountered somebody. And
I remember there are a number of years back there's a lot of people complaining about the restart of the Justice League comic book, because the first 4 issues was basically Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman talking about the various potential applicants and doing nothing.
Yeah.
So decompression is one thing. It depends on how you want to do the story, but if people are expecting action, you got to throw them a bone every once in a while. Or I suppose if you're doing it as a humorous thing, you can always do that like off-screen sort of thing. You know, make it something that happened in between. So I mean, that's the general premise of Teen Titans Go. It's not about them, going actually out on their adventures. It's about what happens in between their adventures.
Yeah.
So Beast Boy can be so extremely lazy, he seems completely worthless in a fight.
Yeah, and I guess I have a comic that I kind of want to get started, and yeah, I wanted to do a lot of that in between stuff, like the stuff where they're just sitting around their base, or they have the stuff they have to do to get through every day. And that could be the main focus of the comic. But I don't know how long that would last before I will get, tired of that and be like, we're just doing all action now.
Well, I mean, if you go to the web comic Girl Power, and you start from the very beginning and you read through, it took several years before the first real action scene happened. There were comedic hijinks and things going on, but the first real super-powered fight didn't happen until, I believe, this last year. And that was like several years of build-up. But that's okay, because how it was delivered, it was like I could have just continued reading them, just goof off and have fun for the rest of eternity. I was loving all the people.
All right. Okay.
But the fight was pretty well done, too, so I enjoyed that. So, it depends on how you do it, how you pace it. Mind you, most of the time it was also one comic put up a week, so you can read through the archives at a much faster pace than it took to have them come out. So it takes you, let's say, 5 minutes to read a single page where you're poring over every detail, looking at all the wonderful illustrations. You can still go through it a lot quicker than it took to watch it one page a week as it slowly crawled up.
Yeah. I think, was that a topic one time about the pace of, how you consume? Yeah, we did that.
Yes, that was, yeah. Both how you consume as well as how it's designed to work. Yeah. Apparently many panels where there's a small amount of action between is supposed to simulate a slower reading style. That said, from my experience, I just, they're all the same panel, it took a long time, and then I go on to the next page where they're talking. I think the better method might be to break it up. A similar scene, a little bit of words, pause, little words, pause, to help simulate a very slower pace of how it's going about.
Actually, yeah, I find that too. Anytime there's text, that feels like time passing to me, because it does take longer to read the text than to look, take in a scene on a panel.
Which is where you can imagine, say, two guys just nursing their sorrows at a bar. Somebody says something, blank panel, no word panel, someone takes a drink. Fourth panel, someone says something again. And that way it feels like they're really nursing their sorrows, as opposed to just, having blank, 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 where the eye can quickly scan over, say, okay, they were just drinking beer, and that's it, go to the next page.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's something that is still very hard to get right. Although I do believe which one is it? Understanding Comics or Creating Comics has some notes about that.
Yeah, the Scott McCloud trilogy, basically.
Yes, I believe it was the Creating Comics one that explains how to do the proper pacing. Yeah. I recommend everyone read that. I recommend everyone read all of his books on that sort of thing. Very profound thoughts lie within.
Yeah. I think we've mentioned Scott McCloud on this podcast before.
Well, it's kind of hard to describe, how to work through comics and some of the details about it without at least referencing him.
Yeah. I give The Helm. The Helm is the name of the book that I read, and so I guess I'll give it a rating, maybe 10.5 out of 13.
Okay. So here's a question: if he had a female sidekick, would she be the Helmet?
Well, I mean, he has a love interest, but I guess, you're talking about a...
Well, I've always been particularly fond of the dynastic centerpiece, as it's being called.
Oh, yes, okay.
Go Google up a dynastic centerpiece, and that should take you to the Absorbascom blog, which first detailed it. And it states that a hero is not alone, and that through trial and error, like a lot of experimentation has determined which character roles work. So you can see it as kind of like a jigsaw puzzle. The hero is the central piece. Then you've got the female counterpart. You've got the junior crime fighting, the black sheep, the elder statesman. All that, and it forms up into imagine the super family, the Bat family. The Shazam family.
Yeah.
They all have the similar sort of roles. Superman, Batman, and Shazam all have their Supergirl, Batgirl, Mary Marvel. And so you can see the parallels between the whole thing. And the more that goes, the more full and complete it seems to many readers. Whereas if you got a character who's missing this sort of stuff, you can tell a very easy, quick story because it doesn't rely on this entire family dragging behind the hero. But it doesn't feel as though the hero is so heroic because the hero is not like the center of their own pantheon, so to speak.
Okay. But here's the weird thing about the superhero family, like you call it family, but Superman is not married to Supergirl or
thank goodness, that's his cousin, dude.
Yeah, because in that case they're cousins. But like in that sort of heroic dynasty, I guess the girlfriend of the hero usually isn't a superpowered person.
No, that would represent the love interest, who is explicitly a non-powered person, whose largest thing is to represent a romantic connection, as well as to get captured a whole lot.
Yeah, they always get kidnapped and be rescued.
Now here's the interesting thing. You have to be careful about the romantic interest versus the civilian friend.
Okay.
Like the Jimmy Olsen. Because if you don't put in the distinction between the two, does Superman have the love interest of Lois Lane or Jimmy Olsen? They both fill very close roles.
Yeah, and I suppose like one might be kind of platonic and one might be a little more romantic.
Fiery passion upon which people might hope to know even once in their lives. So I'll let you decide whether or not that's Jimmy Olsen or Lois Lane. That's strictly up for reader interpretation sometimes. I'm not one to shoehorn into how you read your comics.
I wonder, it might just be that Lois Lane is just the beard,
That is one big theory about how it works. Is he has to pursue Lois Lane because one, she's always getting into trouble, he's always saving her, so they got that connection, and two, it's socially acceptable for like the male-female connection.
Yeah, I mean, even if Superman was just happened to be like asexual or like not have.
Yeah, what if he just what if it was like I'm an alien, like I know we look alike, but there's something completely different about you humans, and I don't find any of you attractive. Because it turns out female Kryptonians have like a head crest or something when they're in heat. And if that doesn't happen, you don't look attractive to a male Kryptonian.
Yeah. And I suppose, we're not that kind of podcast, but if you look around the internet for stories about Superman and his issues with compatibility with human females, you can find a lot of
some
theories.
Very notable people have written some very intriguing articles throughout the decades. Both as in terms of like a biology as well as societal.
Yeah.
But that's why you have to be careful with the dynastic centerpieces to have those rules and to show where they divide.
Yeah. And if you're once you have that structure, you can play around with it. You can say, oh well, we'll combine the friend and the girlfriend, and well, can you? Yeah.
Yes. In which case, you'd have, I believe it was Elongated Man, whose love interest, Jean Loring, she's evil now. Sorry. Was his best friend as well as his crime-fighting companion. So she filled both the role of the love interest, the friend, because they have a very strong friendship before she went evil. And I believe also, let's see. Yeah, I think she also might have been the financier at some point to the thing, to make sure that ends could meet, because she was fairly, well-to-do for her family. So she filled multiple roles.
Yeah.
Not something that's, the dynastic centerpiece is, that says you should have one person who fills all these roles. But if you're going for a quicker, smaller sort of scale, where you don't want to have the hero feel like super heroic, like a pantheon sort of thing, then combining these roles, together is a nice way of keeping the size smaller. Good for quicker stories, I believe. Food for thought for food, I suppose, is a nice way of looking at it. So yes, the helm could have a junior female counterpart as the helmet.
Yeah, and yes.
The play on words works. It writes itself.
Or the helmkin. No, no one would get that unless they lived in Victoria.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I did.
Oh wait, if he has a junior counterpart, would it be like the beanie?
Maybe. The skull cap. That sounds like a bad guy, doesn't it?
Yeah, that would be his villain, the skull cap. It's all hat-based villains. Ooh, in which case then he could he could have like a team up with like a magician who pulls things out of the hat. You know, like, oh, he pulls out like rabbits. In which case he'd be like 6 foot tall rabbit. You know, like bruisers. Do the fighting for him.
I like that. Is that a villain or a good guy? Like what?
It could be either, I suppose. Yeah.
Henchmen or mooks out of the hat.
Yeah. Okay. This is the evil. You know, like magician steals the helm and starts pulling giant, you know, like rabbit bruisers out.
I like
the
that.
Lapinohemoths.
Imagine like a whole series where like the hero is a hat, and it gets traded off to, you know, a different mortal each issue or something like that.
Well, like kind of like that Dial H for Hero series where you have to it was a weird alien device where you have all the letters somehow in like the English alphabet, and you type HERO or, you know, villain, and you became a hero or a villain, and you assume the powers for so long.
Yeah, something like that. And well, I guess the Mask was a little bit like that, except basically in that movie, mostly the one Jim Carrey character wore it the whole thing, except for I think the dog put it on at some point.
And then there was the bad guy who wore it for the third act sort of thing.
But I wonder if when they first came up with that plot, I wonder if that was the idea that they had, was that the mask would be the hero and it would get worn by different characters. And then if, you know, through this process of story writing, they're like, well, no, we'll just simplify it down to just the one main guy.
Well, it's only going to be like a 2-hour movie at most. I mean, it's likely only going to be one guy and a few other, like, quick wares. I believe that was one of the things. I do know that Doctor Strange in the DC universe he's got this weird, nice, funky helmet he puts on. But when he puts on the helmet, he's not the person he was before. There's like a Lord of Order magical thing called Naboo who takes over, you know, the control of the body. You're here just along for the ride now, buddy.
Okay. Yeah.
And so in which case, it's a very close case to like an intelligent helm in this case. How it would be, like, you would have the power transfer, but you're going to wind up having to fight the control, you know, for the magic power based on this. Why, just a Lord of Order. Good luck winning on that one.
Yeah. I wonder, I guess if you were to make it a movie or a television, well, it wouldn't work for television because what people seem to want in television is sort of the same faces week after week. I
don't know, because, I mean, with something like with Doctor Strange, you could really work it the same way you have the incarnations for the Doctor. You have him for so many series, it's like, dude wants to drop it? Fine, we'll kill him and put somebody else in the helmet.
Well, actually, I think that would be kind of fun as a series because you could have multiple actors playing, you know, giving their own interesting take on a character, and like that would be a really cool challenge for the actors because they'd be like, oh, you know what, well, maybe I could do this with it, or maybe I could do, you know, they'll think of their own little angle. And then it would be like a little way to showcase, like, you know, a different actor each. I don't know if it'd be every week.
Well, you could do it with like the British style, where, you know, like many seasons only have like 6 or 7 episodes.
Yeah.
So in which case it's like, okay, so, you know, like we've got you contracted for the season, but it's not going to be that a heck of a lot. And then, you know, come the end of the season, someone else is wearing the helmet. Yeah. So you go through one story arc with the person, and then the helm gets, you know, teleported away to wherever it is needed in this case. So it'd be like some sort of weird Zen power. It's like, I've helped you out, now poof, I go off to someone else who needs my magical prowess.
Okay, yeah, that could probably work. Or I wonder if you could have like a small group, or maybe like, you know, a workplace, or maybe, you know, the basement floor of the X-Men school, or, you know, some
Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters,
or the league, the Justice League's, you know, the guys who work in IT or something, and they come across this mask and they're sort of traded around to each other.
Oh, dig it. I think there's a lot of good options for here with that sort of thing. I'm going to put a pin in that.
Sure, yeah.
I think it would work great as a hero, especially on a television series. I think currently just in my head, seeing Doctor Strange interacting with the Flash and the Arrow and maybe even the Supergirl series could be very well done, and you wouldn't have to worry about keeping the same person underneath the helm, because as long as you've got the same helmet, it's going to look right.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
That said, I think it would also work amazingly as a villain. Because the villain can die after every horrible time, so long as there's someone stupid enough to put on that face mask at the end of it.
Well, that's what I was thinking, and this is why it's kind of a comedy superhero series idea, because it's this world where, like, just hats just happen to be a thing. It's like every, there's heroes with hats, there's villains with hats. It's like,
the white hat, black hat sort of thing.
The Marvel and DC universe are full of heroes. They're like, there's mutants everywhere in the Marvel universe.
Not as much as there used to be, but before, the House of M thing, there was a lot of mutants.
Yeah. Well, in this universe, it's like, instead of mutants, it's hats. There's just magic hats. That's the thing in the universe.
Okay. I'll meet you halfway on this one. There used to be a whole bunch of like different heroes with all their different origins.
Yeah.
Big magical thing happens, and all the heroes die, but their essence lives on in symbolic masks, so that these masks get like thrown out and about. So you got people putting on like the Iron Mask and become like the Iron Man. You got people putting on the Green Mask and they become the Hulk. You got people putting on the Spider Mask and Spider-Man style. In which case, it starts off as that, and that's all backstory for why there's so many masks. And then the event is like, why do people keep finding these masks? It's like, well, these masks circulate through. That's part of like the curse and the event that happened before the issue number 1.
Yeah, sure. And the masks all have their own personality, so they can like do the whole, Lord of the Rings, like the ring jumps off the finger to another person, like, oh, I don't like you anymore, or something like that.
Yeah, or if you you do have free will, so if you manage to violate one of the core tenets of the character who used to be is the mask now, it's like, let's see, Spider-Man's all about responsibility. So if you act irresponsible with his the powers you get while you're wearing it, you're like flipping around through the air, and there goes the mask. Good luck, buddy. I think it'd be pretty easy to be the Hulk, though. As long as you keep smacking stuff around, you got to keep up with that. Oh, but you'd have to consciously hit everything that annoys you. Anytime you hold back on punching something that annoys you, you lose the Hulk mask's favor and off it falls.
Interesting, yeah.
I like this. Okay, I'm putting a pin in all of this stuff here.
Okay, so yeah, we should...
I think I can make XPs of pretty much all of this and come up with a really kickin' concept.
Can we just come up with possibly a name for it, like Mask World or Hat World? Because it could be hats. It
could be hats as well, yes.
An eye patch for the Nick Fury.
Oh, yeah. Or monocles for the classy villain sort of thing. We're going to call it the headwear verse.
Or just like a gold tooth that somebody,
That's a little gruesome, but I can dig it too, yeah.
Okay. One of the villains can be just...
We shall call it Earth Chapeau.
Earth Chapeau.
Yes.
Just...
Connected up to the headwear somewhere. Chapeau makes it sound extra fancy.
Okay. Oh, it could be Capital something. Capital Comics. Because Capital as in hats.
High Top Comics. There you go. High Top Comics presents Earth Chapeau.
Okay, for real, we should move on. I don't know. That's what I did. I read a comic book and played video games.
Oh, not bad. I got a chance to watch the Black Cauldron again. I hadn't watched it in a very long time. I took my daughter to the library earlier this week, and I noticed, hey, they've got it. And so, you know what, she's having fun there, but I'll, we'll see if we can take it home. We're going to get pizza anyway, so why not do pizza and a movie? Mm-hmm. I liked it. It was a bit of a short movie compared to what I think it could have been. For the
how long? Do you know how many minutes it was?
Standard length for a Disney flick.
For an animated show?
Yeah, about 90 minutes or so.
90 minutes-ish?
They did always have the concept of this is the young man who's got to go off on the adventure, and he winds up succeeding through a lot of happenstance and factors beyond his own control. Because, he's just an assistant pig farmer who loses his pig. So it's like, well, you are, no wonder you're not going out to war fighting any battles. You can't even be an assistant pig farmer very well. Why do you think anyone would trust you with a sword? Gah! But that aside, it worked very nice. It's a small dry run showing what the book is about. From what I've been told, it's actually not too close, but just close enough to get the attention and what the whole thing works. The villain, I did like the Horned King. Even if he technically wasn't the biggest bad. The biggest bad was the evil soul that the gods feared that was imprisoned within the Black Cauldron that made it this horrible, evil, immortal, like MacGuffin.
Okay. Does it do anything in the movie?
Yes, if you put a corpse, it explains this within the first 5 minutes or so. Okay. You put a corpse into the cauldron and it comes out like animate, like a deathless, eternal soldier.
Like a zombie, basically? Ish. Kind of zombie-ish?
Kind of like an undying skeleton.
Okay.
That will follow, I guess, the person who put him in there. So this guy's being a crew, and this Horned King's got a lot of corpses to work with here. He's going to be popping into the cauldron.
And they follow you, as in they walk wherever you
No,
walk,
they will obey your
obey
demands.
orders. Okay.
So yeah, like you pop a whole bunch of people into the cauldron, and like the whole horrible green energy starts coming out there, and just it's kind of like a green mist that goes through it. And everybody starts coming up, and they all follow you. You say, go out and ravage the lands in my name, and they'll start heading out.
So, and it's just like a genie, like you can just tell them what to do.
I suppose you have to be within earshot. No. All you really need to do is pop like a skeleton into the thing and have it come out.
Yeah.
It's fairly user friendly for something. Because the story starts off with, there was once a man so evil even the gods feared him, and so they burned his soul into like a whole bunch of like ingots of metal, which was used to forge this cauldron, which is now the Black Cauldron. It's indestructible. And it's a horrible, horrible artifact that completely shatters morality if you try and use it. Cool. You are not even amoral if you try and use it. You are evil.
Okay, yeah.
So it was pretty good. The humorous sidekick, I appreciated. It was endearing. The villain was good and villainous. My daughter was watching it with me, and she saw the first scene with the Horned King being all evil, lich, kind of, I'm a horrible evil guy. And when the scene was ending, she goes, ooh, scary. But she didn't cry. So it was scary enough.
It wasn't that scary.
No, it was scary enough for her to realize this is a big, bad person who's doing bad things, but not scary enough where she's going to start crying from it. So I think it's just perfect amount of evil for the kids to pay attention to. Without worrying about it.
You rarely find movies these days with just the right amount of evil.
Well, that's the thing. It's a Disney film, and a lot of the Disney villains are bumbling incompetents.
Yeah. That
usually wind up falling to their own death off of something. Apparently, the only thing you need to do to make sure there's no evil existing in a Disney universe...
Have a lot of high ledges.
A lot of high ledges and a lot of floor wax. Anybody evil will just slip and fall. You hear like a Wilhelm scream or a Goofy cry as they fall down into the void. You don't even get a chance to see them hit ground. That's it. You got rid of one source of evil. Keep waxing the floors.
Huh. I wonder if it's a secret campaign for some floor wax company.
Wouldn't that be awesome? It's they finally come out with it. It's just been a 4-decade build-up. Ever since, but actually, it used to be almost a half-century now for some of the stuff.
I can't even think of a brand of floor wax. Probably Johnson & Johnson, or...
I don't know. Well, that's the thing. Maybe they better attach a name to it before it becomes too late.
I know Turtle Wax, but I think that's for a different...
Well, here's the thing. You wouldn't even need to be the company that, bribing, Disney to do that. All you need to do is have a bunch of commercials where you have a goofish villain, just slip and fall. So, so-and-so floor wax. It's good. It just shows, he falls off just...
Although, do you really want, is that really the selling point of floor wax? Because I think it's to make the floors look shiny. But I don't know if they necessarily want people to be slipping and sliding.
That's just a side effect of having it so clean. You get the people doing the sliding on there and having fun and moving back and forth and pretending they're on playing a game of hockey or something.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I figure it can't be any worse than the Jet Dry commercials. You see those on TV, and it's oh no, you've got spots on your dishes. And then there's a little area where you put the Jet Dry, and it's a talking mouth, and he goes, fill me up with Jet Dry, glug 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 glug. And it's you just showed a bunch of kids to drink Jet Dry for a good purpose.
Well, I never made that connection, but now...
I was just looking at it, that is completely imitatable by kids. They're going to find Jet Dry, and they're going to go glug, 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 glug. Let's clean the dishes. As they drop to the floor and vomit, dying. So, having a villain, a cartoonish villain, just slip and fall, from a floor wax thing can't be any worse than a Jet Dry. Come on.
Yeah.
So there's that. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I think it could have been so much more. But then again, this was the movie that almost ended all of Disney's animated action stuff. It did so poorly in the theaters because it was I won't lie, it was darker than most Disney stuff. You picture Disney film into your head right there. Okay, that image you just got right there.
In what year?
Well, it doesn't matter. It all has that certain sort of level of how dark it gets.
Okay.
The Dark Cauldron, the Black Cauldron, that's even darker. It's one level lower.
All right.
I guess there was a lot of people that were expecting it to not be so dark or so grim or even potentially so scary. Because it did show skeletons. Ooh, scary.
I remember some pretty dark moments in, Sleeping Beauty. Beauty and the Beast also had some pretty dark moments in it. Sleepy Hollow. Although that's supposed to be...
Sleepy Hollow was a bit of a short sort of thing. It wasn't really a full movie.
Okay, yeah. But
unless you're going with the Johnny Depp one, but that's not Disney.
No. But yeah, Disney, I always thought Disney had a few dark moments.
It had a few dark moments, but this was like a nice tint lower and darker.
Okay, even darker than that. Okay.
Yeah. That said, I still recommend it. View it once, especially if you're curious about maybe reading the novel. It's a nice quick dry run to show what you have to expect for the whole thing.
Sure.
But as I said, it could have been so much more. They could have had if the author of the Black Cauldron is still alive and listening to this right now, consider trying to option it for a live action movie. I mean, The Hobbit's done, Lord of the Rings is done. People still want their pseudo medieval fantasy. Oh, hey, look, you just happen to have the Black Cauldron. A movie that's already got some notoriety in it as a cartoon, do it as a live-action series. I think you could rocket the whole thing out.
Yeah, I think that'd be worth it for Disney to try.
I don't know if Disney still has the rights for it as a live-action, but I believe, or any version, they pretty much disowned that one. They dropped that one like a hot potato, and they unless they have to do something to maintain the rights to it, they don't even touch that anymore, I've been told. It is toxic for them.
Speaking of Disney, just quick tangent. Have you seen the ads for Tomorrowland?
I have seen the ads for Tomorrowland.
Yeah, I haven't seen the actual movie yet, but I really want to see it. I heard it didn't do that well, and I was like, oh, that's too bad.
Well, a lot of people were expecting something else from it. Again, it's different expectations versus reality. From what I've been told, it's people see it as too old style and too goofy, and it's supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be like what Tomorrow was like so many years back, and what they were imagining, jetpacks. So yeah, we'll have jetpacks. We're not gonna bother with the concern about it boiling somebody's feet into ash. A jetpack, baby. And so a lot of people just weren't getting the concept. Whereas maybe if they had cut the commercials into a bit way to show that it was the Tomorrow as seen from the 60s, maybe it would have been a little bit better received. And who knows, maybe there'll still be in our audience for us. I thought it was just going to be a generic thing, based on one of those Disney rides. But now that I know it's actually, showing what people expected the future to be like, well, maybe I can enjoy it rightly. There was a lot of people that didn't like Sweeney Todd because they didn't know it was a musical. The movie was a good movie, but if you're not if you don't get the warning dude, it's a musical, you're gonna be like, I wasn't prepared for a musical. I don't know. I just really don't like it. I wasn't prepped up. I didn't like watching Fargo the first time because I didn't know it was gonna be a black comedy.
That's interesting. That could almost be a topic.
True Lies too. I thought it wasn't gonna be like a comedy. I thought it was just gonna be another Arnold Schwarzenegger, action flick. It's like. But, I saw it, it's wow, this is actually humorous and hilarious, and I'm digging it in so many levels.
Yeah. And
the commercials did not show that, though.
It's weird how, audiences, when they have an expectation, it's you better meet that, or, you can do a really great, work of art or whatever, performance or whatever it is, but if you don't do the thing, if
someone came to see a duck, at the park, and there's a bunch of trained crocodiles. It doesn't matter how good the crocodiles are. It's not the duck you were looking for.
Yeah. That's just a weird thing about. I mean, I think personally, as a consumer of art, I think I would rather have more of an open attitude and say, well, if I don't get what I was expecting, I should open myself up and I will have a better life if I just accept whatever I'm getting.
Your expectations just go out the window. I don't know what I'm going in for. I do like the general premise from what I've been told. I enjoy the actors. I've trusted them before in other movies. Show me what you guys got.
I think, but maybe that might be a very hard thing to do ultimately.
Also, getting harder and harder as it goes on with a lot of the amount of stuff for the some of these movies that are coming out for leaked footage here and image stills there. It's am I going to not know anything about the movie? I'm going to basically be able to put everything into the place and guess the entire movie by the time it comes out for some of these things.
Yeah.
So take it from for me is it might not be easy. It's probably worthwhile to go in with just opening expectations.
Yeah, and I guess also what another thing you can do as a creator is you can, in the beginning of your story or whatever, if you're making a movie or whatever, you can sort of establish a little bit of that. So just be pretty clear about, this is what we're giving you, sort of thing.
That's usually a job for the people cutting the commercials. In which case they have to, get you interested in what it actually is. Or I suppose if the movie's really bad, you got to find some way to trick them to get in saying it's something else. Let's face it, not all movies are great things. Sometimes you got to trick some people, get that profit back, and you can't give away enough though, so that the big plot twists are there. It's I already saw the movie in the 30-second version when you guys tried to sell it to me.
Yeah.
So. Because, look at some of the older commercials for the movies. Pick a movie from the 80s and then try and find the trailer for it up on YouTube. And it's a much different cut than what you see these days.
Mm-hmm.
C'est la vie. But yes, the other things I did this week. I played a little bit more of The Secret World. Nothing too much to mention there. I tried to keep away from doing the dailies and do a little bit more progress. Mm-hmm. Fought a lot of vampires. Had some fun with it. Killed a diseased bear. Had some fun. The bear needed to get put down. It was a horrible thing. It was also a rare, so I got a 5-point achievement for killing it.
Oh,
that's all the incentive I apparently need. I think it's the only one of 3 bears in the game, to the best of my knowledge.
I like that. 3 bears, huh?
Well, that's the thing. They're all horrible. 2 of them are in the one Solomon Island. One of them's a rare spawn I have never seen. I still got to get the 5-point achievement for that. And the other one is a huge, this is get everyone up with good gear, get a 5-man party, start getting ready to tank sort of thing. This is not a bear for you just go around and smack, man. This is Papa Bear here. The other bears are soloable. No, not this bad boy. So,
it's just right.
Yeah.
This bear is too easy.
Well,
this bear is too hard.
Here's the thing about this one though: is with the big bad bear they've got there, you have to undo some binding stuff on it. So it's not just walking around ready to maul the hell out of anyone walking by.
Right.
You actually have to undo the thing to properly attack it. So that's a good thing. I guess that's just right. It's really tough, but it can't accidentally walk up to you and kill you while you're doing stuff normally.
Okay.
So I'll say it is just right in that it's this kind of fair and balanced. Fair and balanced. So I do a spoonerism there.
Very good.
In bigger news, last time my brother Jason was in town, I went down to Curious 2, the Curious comics that divided and to focus with all their gaming material.
Right.
And we've had the $5 section for all the stuff they got to get rid of. It didn't sell for whatever reason. So it's priced down to $5 now. And so I said to my brother, hey, you find yourself a book, I'll get a book, I'll pay for both of them. And he did. He got a book he seemed to enjoy, and I finally got around to starting to read the book that I picked up. It's called Omnivax. And to the best of my knowledge, it is done by one lady, with some illustrations by others. Cynthia Miller did it. Mm-hmm. And it's about Silver Age adventures in a, they have the Champion system, Silver Age Sentinels role-playing system, and the Mutants and Mastermind Superlink system.
So it's a multiple system role-playing supplement.
Yes, it features the Metazon Isles. In this world, what happened was the meteorite that killed dinosaurs didn't land in the Yucatan Peninsula. It landed, 465 miles off the coast of Georgia and South Carolina. Still killed all the dinosaurs, though. But this one left behind a wonderful deep crater, a large amount of area. I think roughly the size of Colorado, they describe it, as all the land area combined. And it has this green crystal called Omnivax that sweats like a mysterious red thing that causes mutations, particularly in unborn kids, that causes superpowers. So that's why there's all the superheroes there, yeah. It is a Silver Age style, and I've been reading it, and I'm digging it. I feel guilty now having paid only $5 for it.
Okay. Because
I believe this Cynthia Miller and all the work she did deserved more than $5. Not that she actually had to just get $5 off of it, but
right.
I feel at this point I probably should, because I've learned so much from it. It's more than $5 value. So, throw up the horns. I came out ahead. I got a good deal off this. But it contrasts interestingly because I've also been going to the website Scans Daily. Scans Daily's been around since 2003 in one form or another. I believe it was started on LiveJournal back in the day. What they do is they say, hey, here's this comic coming out, and they'll put out some pages of a thing and say, like, oh, this is what happened, here's the general highlights. They got into trouble when some people were putting, like, every page of a comic on there. Mm-hmm. And it was like, hey, like, dude, I make my living, please don't do that. And they say, no, forget you. And it's like, fine, I'll sue you guys and I'll get your site shut down. And so I decided to leave around then. Things were getting toxic. Some people were like, how dare they tell us how many pages we can put up on here? And I was like, well, maybe it was a little excessive. And so, things were getting a little toxic. So I left the scene back in the day. When Scans Daily was trying to find a new site to host, and there was a full Scans Daily, which was dedicated to showing every last page of the story. I'm pretty sure the full Scans Daily got shut down multiple times before they finally gave up the ghost. But I came back to it recently, and they've got a nice thing about, like, you can only show, like I think it's 1/3 or so of the pages per story. And then they've got some rules about people doing, like, web comics, so you can only show so many pages per story arc. Very nice, very reasonable. It's very much smacks of a nice compromise whereby they can still show the people the story, talk about what's going on, and the writers won't have to, and the illustrators and all that won't have to worry about, like, dude, you're giving everything away. Just enough of a hint to get you wanting more, kind of like an appetizer, I suppose. And one of the things I really do like about Scans Daily, which I liked the first time, and a lot of the people are still there, so it's like, congratulations, guys, you've held out in the long haul, is that they talk intelligently and rationally about it. If they don't like this issue, they will say why they don't like this issue, why it makes them uncomfortable. And so I can really learn. It's like, okay, you didn't like this issue here, and here's the logical reasons why. And other people will logically say, but I believe you're misreading it. It's supposed to be interpreted in this way. It's like, oh, I didn't see it from that way. It is much better this way. And so it's like, oh, hey, a cognizant debate. On the internet. How wonderful am I to find this again? But one of the arguments that keeps popping up is like, I really miss the days when the heroes fought, villains rather than each other. And the various things is like, oh, I hate Wolverine because, he's a murderer and he's a bad hypocrite and some of the things. And, like, I'm reading this Omnivex here, which is based on a Silver Age comics sort of style. And I'm reading up about the Comic Code Authority. And I'm reading about these people's arguments. And I'm seeing a lot of the people's arguments are based on this doesn't meet the Comic Code Authority. The heroes aren't acting enough like heroes that they would have if they had fallen under that. Which is, by the way, where we're going to lead into for the main topic for this week.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I'm looking over at the Comic Code stuff, because they have that put in Omnivex towards the end. It's like a GM's guide to how to run this sort of thing.
Right. So if you're going to run the Silver Age...
here's some things to know. Like, what was the Silver Age like? What were some of the fears going on? What were some of the styles? Like, there's some bits on costume. Like, what were the technical limitations for making a costume in there? And so, like, Golden Age stuff, pretty much everyone looked alike. There wasn't much room for variation because of the primitive printing techniques. Whereas, like, you didn't have the color contrast you do today in comics and illustrations, but you had more colors you could do and a bit better resolution. So you could have a bit more complex, but not too complex costume design. And so that was very interesting to consider, too. It's like, okay, I want to make sure my hero, if I'm designing a basic sort of costume for him, it's not too intricate, not too designed, not too many colors going on, not too much shading required. Like, you take a look at, some of the stuff going on for, I think, Iron Man stuff for, like, the second Age of Ultron. It's a very detailed design, because they can do that. This is high screen resolution stuff. This is HD versus, like images going on. You did not have anywhere near that amount. You got two colors, you got some basic image designs around on the chest. Congratulations, there's your Silver Age Iron Man. That's it. They probably would have loved to do more. I wouldn't be surprised if you could go and find some of the artists drawing really intricate designs for their own purposes of what they would have liked Iron Man to be that would never have been able to be published because of technical limitations. And so there's some interesting things about that.
Like tips on how to...
Tips and concepts, what was going on to, what Well, this is like the 1960s, so you got to worry about communists. It's the Red Scare.
So don't do red heroes?
Well, you can do red, and you can definitely draw red, but communists, were a big fear. So, it was... You go back to the Golden Age, and everyone was fighting Nazis. Superman's, fighting Nazis here. Wonder Woman, she cut her teeth on fighting Nazis, all the time. By the time the 60s rolled around, apparently the Nazis had been hit pretty hard. But the communists were out in force, so, you had your communists, it's a nice generic villain. You could just throw in, and here's a villain, he's a communist, fight him. Why do you fight him? He's a communist, he's a bad guy. Simple, fun stories. Things where, logic be damned. Sometimes it goes crazy. Because there were times when what they did was they had somebody draw the cover to the issue. And then they said, okay, here's the cover, write a story based on this. And oh, man. And so that's where you got some of the really crazy stories from the Silver Age. It's why is Superman forcing Jimmy Olsen to marry a gorilla? Find out inside. And that was actually an issue of Superman in the Golden Age.
That's how they did that one?
I don't know if that's how they did that one, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's okay, draw a thing. It's okay, Jimmy Olsen marries a gorilla, Superman makes him do it. And then it's okay, write a reason why. Heck, that's as good an explanation for why he made Jimmy Olsen marry a gorilla. It's the front page, thing, the cover said, that's how it goes, so you gotta make it happen.
Okay.
Super science. Science was progressing at very rapid rates. It was a very intriguing time for what you could do and what you could do and what might you be able to do in 5 years' time. That's when people were imagining, by 1985, we'll be living on the moon in cities. Ha ha ha, and our hover cars will exist everywhere. Super science was a concept. People weren't jaded by what science could do, what it couldn't do, and it would be used by corporations to track where you're going, what we're worried about now for how much data we're giving away. Science was awesome. They were doing cool things, and anything was possible. Archetypes for the villains, Golden Age. You had
Are you reading the whole book basically?
No. Okay. But Golden Age had you only had so many pages to work with, so you had to understand a villain right away. You didn't have time to understand the intricacies. Okay. So it says, hey, here's a concept, go with a bruiser. The bruiser doesn't have to, you don't have to understand a 32-page backstory for decompression as to why he became a villainous bruiser who fights heroes for money. He's a bruiser, he hits the hero has to try and find a way to not get hit, especially if they fall unconscious from such a thing. There you go. That's your big tip for the day. But it did show the comic code authority and what you could and couldn't do, and this was I imagine people effectively trying to write with both hands tied behind their back for some of the stuff you just couldn't do. Now, some of it made sense. You didn't want because this was kid-oriented stuff, so you don't go too dark. Don't show crazy, blood everywhere sort of scenes. The bit that always gets me though is you can't show anything involving The Walking Dead, torture, vampires, ghouls, cannibalism, or werewolves. Those were complete no-go zones. You can't do that at all.
Oh, okay.
And that strikes me as weird because you could probably tell some pretty good stories. Blade as a concept, he's a daywalker vampire, but he still needs blood from time to time. So at what price is heroism? What would you give up? What negative side effects would you have in order to be the hero? If you could save the day 4 or 5 times, a month, depending on how you're publishing and how many crossovers you're doing.
Does it count as a sacrifice if your sacrifice is other people have to suffer?
Well, it's the thing. If you're Super Josh here.
Yeah. Okay.
Unfortunately, you had to sell your soul to a demon to do it.
Okay.
So the demon demands 1 human sacrifice a year, but you are able to save the wonderful city of Victoropolis. Let's say not everything, is save the planet, the city every time, but you save it every other issue, so that's 6 times a year. You're saving everyone in the city. Is that okay to make that one sacrifice to save the city so many times a year, to save so many lives repeatedly?
Yeah. If the city is under that kind of threat, yeah, sure. We're imagining basically a city that's under siege by,
super villains and aliens. Aliens were a big thing in the 60s,
yeah.
too. A good way to represent the Red Scare without actually having it to be communist every time. They're just communist-style aliens coming down.
Okay.
And so, you couldn't have a vampire, a hero trying to save the day, and they need blood every once in a while. Because, you can't be a vampire in this comic code age. And so I'm thinking, it's like, they really prevented a lot of pretty good stories.
Well, you couldn't be a vampire, but, I mean, I imagine they could create a sort of an equivalent hero.
They did. They managed to really subvert that with the hero, or the villain, Sauron.
Okay.
He's an X-Men thing from, like, they have the land down in Antarctica where it's actually dinosaurs down there. Aliens came down so many millions of years ago, said, hey, I kind of like all the animals here. We'll create like a game preserve and we'll put them all in here. Evolution will never happen. And then you've got the savage land, which is like in Antarctica but still tropical. So it's like, ooh, kind of awesome. But they had a man who became effectively a were-pterodactyl who drained the life essence out of people by staring at them. So he was both effectively like a werewolf and a vampire at the same time. But because he was a pterodactyl and he drained life essence from you by staring at you rather than drawing blood, they got away with it. Okay. They managed to subvert the Comic Code Authority, so hooray, subversion.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Comic Code, it comes up every once in a while, and it is not especially... people don't look on it favorably from, like, our era. We're like, yeah, that was kind of dumb.
Well, I mean, look at He-Man. How many times did he use his sword as not a sword, but like a shield? Or, like, he has the option of he's, I'm not going to fight the enemy with my sword. I'll just shove them away. It's like, dude, you got a sword. That is a legitimate weapon. But why does he not, start hacking and slashing? Can't show blood. Kids' cartoon. You got restrictions on what you can do. And it's the same thing for the comics. On the other hand, here's the thing, though. A lot of the people's arguments are like, the heroes don't seem heroic enough. I can't tell who the heroes are from the villains. These stories have ruined the heroes, and I can no longer take proper joy from them anymore, because I can't see them as being heroic. Yeah. And so it occurs to me, it's like, the Comic Code Authority, despite it not being well remembered, is actually being missed.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, I do think that there are other societal pressures that caused comic books to portray heroes the way they did. I mean, yes, the Comic Code,
the CCA,
had some influence for sure, and they did, and sometimes it would be in weird directions, not unintended, and that's a side effect of codes is that sometimes you interpret them by the letter and not the spirit. And you get weird, you get like RoboCop, where it's hiding the violence actually intensifies the scene rather than making it silly, like the way it was intended.
It was, yeah. For those who don't know, I mean, RoboCop was not intended to be the action thriller. It actually is deeply subversive.
Yeah, it's supposed to be basically, funny.
It's a parody, a deep, grim parody of both what people thought the future was going to be like, what you could and couldn't do for violence and all that stuff. It was delicious in many, many forms. It mentally kept me busy for years of thought when I was young.
Yeah.
I'd buy that for $1.
Yeah, so, what point was I making again?
That sometimes the non-showing can heighten its expression.
Yeah, but before that, about the comic book code. Oh, just that, the code had weird unintended effects. Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't all bad effects. I mean, they had a big storyline where, how do we get rid of all these vampires in the Marvel Universe? Doctor Strange will cast a spell that banishes all vampires and destroys them all, or shunts them into another whatever reality or whatever actually happened. And so all the vampires just they had a big story, the crossover thing, and all the vampires just got, no, you're gone now. Except for the one heroic vampire hero that they had. He was like, you know what, we hate to lose such a good hero, so we'll say in this case, he was such a good person, instead of, getting shunted away with all the evil vampires, he becomes a normal human once again.
So I'm a little bit confused at this. So
it created a good storyline.
When the comic book code came out, then immediately all the comic book companies were like, oh, okay, we'll tell one last vampire story and get rid of all the vampires.
Well, here's the thing, is it was not required for them to follow it, but because of the aura of the day and what you had to do in order to sell your comics, if you didn't have the comic code thing put on there, it would not be put in for the kids to buy.
The distributors wouldn't
They wouldn't touch it. It would be toxic for them, effectively. It's get this away from me. So what they did was okay, but we got to get one story. So they had what is widely regarded as a very good story for Doctor, Strange casting this huge spell that winds up, banishing the vampires. And it was considered, oh yes, it's a very well done story. And you got rid of the vampires, so now everything meets the comic code for that end of things.
Okay.
Except for the Hannibal King, who's no longer a vampire, he's now like a normal person again. So his character received some progression, as opposed to being let's face it, comics are largely a static thing, where status quo is God, right? You do not progress. He was actually, because of this code, forced to progress into something else, and so he was able to grow from this thing. So it wasn't all bad, because some good stories came out of it. Characters were able to become more than the static equivalent that they were always going to wind up being otherwise. So hooray!
Okay. I was going to say, though, I still think that there was definitely a thread within comics that was trending towards heroism anyways. I mean, you saw that in the Golden Age. You have heroic characters that are very black and white, good and evil. And then I suppose what happened, the reason there's comic code...
Inquisitions, people, talking, it's subverting, the innocence of the youth.
Yeah, was because some certain titles began to sort of drift over into...
I won't lie, I've seen some old stuff from the Tales of the Crypt and, the Vault of Horrors and all that stuff that Max Gaines put out before the CCA came into effect. It was not for kids, but apparently everyone had the mindset, it's a comic, it must be for kids. And no, this stuff was definitely not, this is not something you show a kid. I probably read a few of those stories that got reprinted from a cousin of mine. I picked his up and I probably read it a little too early. There was some stuff that were stuck in my mind for years, why did that happen? Why would that was so gruesome, why would that go? And it's only later on, now that I'm a full-fledged adult, it's I realized the subtle nuances of what's going on there. And I was finally able to hit that resolution. But if you're a younger person and your mind gets stuck on that wheel, you get focused in a bad train of thought, next thing you know, you're not mentally firing on all cylinders because you're working on that one, it's just going on overload. You don't have the mental maturity to process it properly.
Sure, yeah. Well, I think that's possibly the case, but I mean, I've always thought that basically that a comic code is not really the way. Well, I don't know if this podcast is where we discuss whether it's appropriate to do a code of ethics or whatever.
Well, here's the interesting thing about it is that we are currently in a state where everything on TV has to have a code. Back in the 60s, it didn't. The comics did. Now the comics don't, but the TV shows do.
Yeah, they have ratings.
And that's the thing. The comic show, the TV shows have the ratings, whereas the comic code was a one and valid. Either you were or you weren't. It's binary. Huh. Now it's all there's no comic code. Basically, they dropped that once they were able to realize we can let it go. There has the Vertigo line for DC Comics and the Marvel Max imprint. Those are meant for mature audiences only, and they very much state that.
Yeah.
But there's no real comics rating system going on for any of that now.
Okay. Well, yeah, I noticed. Yeah, it's kind of with comics at least. It is sort of there's a two-tier. There's books for everyone and books for mature. There's no with TV and video games. You have sort of tiers of this is for kids and this is for PG. Do we still have PG-13 and that sort of rating PG-13.
I believe they do in America. I think we've changed it up here in Canada, though. But you've got your G, your PG-13.
T and M and R, and of course.
Technically, the X rating still exists, although it's changed a lot since when it first came out. Because was it that Dustin Hoffman movie where he plays the male prostitute? That was rated X when it first came out. They didn't show anything. Was it Rhinestone Cowboy?
I didn't see that one.
It's a little bit before your time. It's been a long time since I saw any of it. It has a young Dustin Hoffman in it.
Okay.
Very good.
I like him.
It is considered a great, great movie, but when it first came out, because it dealt with the concept of prostitution, especially male prostitution, it had to get an X rating. So it was an X-rated movie, despite the fact it is not what you would think of as an X-rated movie by today's standards and ratings.
Sure, yeah.
But here's the thing. I would love to be able to pick up some comics for my daughter and make sure that she's okay to read them. But there's no way of knowing, is this Spider-Man story?
You just have to read them, yeah.
Well, I'm not going to read an entire story. I don't think this is really good for my daughter. I'm just going to put it back. I don't want to be that guy. So a comics rating system, as opposed to just CCA binary is or isn't, would actually help me as a comic purchasing adult trying to find something for my daughter. Okay. Is this Spider-Man story good for kids? I mean, is this up to snuff? Again, is this or is it Spider-Man deals with some horrible, deep, real world issues. It's like, no, I'd like to know without reading the entire thing and then maybe putting it back because it wasn't good enough. And then there's that guy who's watching me, he's like, this guy just comes in, he reads the comic every month and puts it back saying it's not good enough for his kid. Yeah, right, I don't think he even has a kid. I don't want to be that guy. The comic book store ain't a library. And I'm willing to accept that. And I could pick out a lot better choices if there was a comic rating system.
Yeah, okay. All right. Yeah, I think I support that because there are a lot of different, that's the other thing about today's market is people have different tastes, and something you might actually find acceptable, someone else might not. So might say, well, I don't want my kid to see that, but you might think, my kid can handle that.
I'm fairly liberal in many regards in that, if there's a vampire there, I'm not going to immediately naysay it. But there are people out there who say, vampire, that's almost blatantly satanic. There's no way my kids are reading that. So I can understand. I mean, if they don't want their kids reading about vampires, go for it. Mind you, there's a lot of variants on vampires these days compared to back in the 60s, too. You got your sparkling twinkle fairies now. They weren't around in the 60s.
Right.
They were basically like bloodthirsty corpses back then, man. Ooh, horrible things.
But I have a question,
okay.
The superheroes, do you think they would have drifted earlier if they had been sort of given a chance? Do you think they would have drifted off into that sort of crime and horror territory and heroes becoming more villainous?
Some yes, others no. I think Superman would have had to have been kept as clean because Superman just doesn't work when he goes grim and dirty. It doesn't feel like Superman.
Well, they've done grim and dirty Superman stories,
and it never winds up getting a real good review. It's always like, it's too grim for it to be Superman.
Okay.
Now here's the thing here. For the Comic Code Authority, policemen, judges, government officials, and respected institutions shall never be presented in such a way as to create disrespect for established authority. You could not tell a current Batman story without having the Gotham City Police Department be corrupt. Why does he dress up like a crazy bat, stalk the alleys, and scare the bejesus out of hobos every night? Well, it's not like he can just spend all that money, he used to become Batman, just donate that to the Gotham City Police. They'll find ways. It'll just disappear. That money ain't going to find its way down to the people to actually protect. Batman has to become the vigilante. And that's one of the best reasons I've heard for him doing that. Although, maybe if we want to be a little bit more realistic, Batman, or I guess, it'd be Bruce Wayne, just sponsors a team of, mercenaries. I guess it'd be, somewhat mercenaries, somewhat vigilantes, because he's hired them, to go and patrol and be the cops that the cops aren't. So I think I might be a little bit more realistic. But why does he do it? You can't trust the cops. There's Jim Gordon. He's a nice guy. You got Bullock and Montoya, and they're not bad. But a lot of those people are on the take there. But you couldn't tell that under the Comic Code Authority. You couldn't have these great stories as to telling why he could be that. Because if you show so many cops being on the graft and in the pocket of the mafia. Well, maybe he should have just given $1 million somewhat dollars to the Gotham City Police Department so they could have had all these good people that could stop the criminals.
That is interesting that it's almost like they're legislating mythology. They're saying, this is the...
I don't ever think that was their intent, but that really was what they were doing, yes.
Yeah. Well, this is the ideal that heroes, that kids are supposed to look to and sort of believe that the world ought to be, even if maybe
it's very unrealistic.
And even if everybody knows that that's not how the real world works or whatever. We have this mythology that this imagined ideal world in which superheroes live, in which all the cops are good, and
it blatantly says in the CCA that the good guys always have to win. I know for a while in the comics, after it was all dropped, it's like, why do the good guys always win? And that was a question that they were asking. Turns out, in the DC comics, in this universe, the good guys always win. It's some sort of weird, crazy, universal law that happens. But over in Earth 3, the bad guys always win, because that, universal constant is reversed there. And so you have this weird thing you can't beat the the evil version of the Justice League from Earth 3 unless they're in your universe. If you're in theirs, you can't win. The universe finds a way to side against you. And that's an interesting story that came about from the good guys always win, and why is that? Universal constants. So it became a weird little fun and crazy bit for that. I'm pretty certain they've dropped it since then.
Okay.
But it was a fun story. You know, like, why do we win? Well, the universe is on our side. You go to that universe, you can't win because the universe isn't on your side. It's a different universe. So I was like, ooh, what a very interesting story to tell. But couldn't have been told through the CCA. But it did come out because of them. Weird.
Well, yeah, that's interesting, seeing how they navigated it in order to create more stories.
Well, once it got dropped, they had to explain, well, why you've been winning all this time. It's like, well, here's a nice little story. I hope you guys enjoy it. My reasoning for it. Okay. I believe the stories were fairly well received, if considered a little hokey. But given the fact that the CCA caused the Silver Age to be, come about as an industry in the comics, I mean, the reason why it's hokey is because that's what they kind of instituted. It couldn't be anything other than. They forced it into that role. Sure. So anytime you see it now, it's like, oh, it's just so Silver Age hokey. And it's like, well, yeah, because you're following those rules to some degree. I think the rules should be laxed, but I wouldn't mind seeing them back in at least some forms. But here's the thing. Let's apply this to other areas, in other fictions.
Okay, all right.
Let's work with paladins in D&D.
Right, one of the biggest. You're talking about codes now.
Yes, just a code is the general principle.
Like a code of conduct, almost either written or like a memorized, like the Boy Scouts code, or
yeah, anything like that. For instance, D&D. I mean, if you go back to second edition, there was a huge thing about what paladins could and could not do. They had to give so much of their wealth over. They could not keep more than this much from I think 10 magical items. They weren't allowed to associate with people who were evil. This is almost like a CCA level thing. It was binary. Either you were good enough to be a paladin and you follow these rules, or you were not a paladin and you had no paladin based powers. And so in that case, you work it from the realm of fiction. This is not a code that exists in some higher realm of reality. This is something they have to follow. You know the rules. These are the laws of the paladin. And so that's almost like a nice way of looking at the CCA. Because on the one hand, you get people like, oh, dang it, I really like the Paladin's powers, but I hate having to follow all those regulations. And it's like, well, congratulations, you're like a min-maxer, buddy. You want all the benefit, but none of the requirements that come from it.
Right. Well, sometimes the requirements are kind of nonsensical, and they can lead, sometimes you get contradictions, and maybe those are interesting story-wise, but also it's a little bit, I don't know, You'd think you could just, violate it a little bit in this case, and
no, but that's a path of the paladin. It is inviolate. You cannot violate. You can't even go any which way. It is a very slippery slope off of that peak. That said, I remember one person saying, it is the worst class to play because it demands the other players behave as you do to some degree. Otherwise, you lose your powers.
Yeah.
You can't hang around evil people. So if you have an evil rogue in your party, that rogue has to stop being evil or you lose your powers. So rather than it's just I follow my code of conduct, it's like you guys have to follow my code of conduct, otherwise I have no power.
Well,
I'm glad they changed that into 5th edition.
You lose some powers, but you retain the ability to swing a sword and wear armor and ride a horse.
Yeah, but you don't get the turn undead, the magic spells, the immunity to plagues, the ability to heal disease, and all those fun other things that make paladins so juicy and delicious.
Yeah, okay.
To use a term. In which case, I think that might be an interesting thing to think about for whatever system or for you're working with your rules and regulations is figure out both one, why do you have these in place? And two, make sure that it doesn't present these weird situations whereby, the second edition paladin needs you to follow his rules, otherwise he loses his powers.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Because associating with an evil person, you lose your abilities unless you're atoning, and in which case you still can't hang out with the evil guys.
Yeah, definitely a code can be problematic. And the thing about sort of, real-world historical codes is that they were written by people who were like, okay, we're going to...
Highly fallible, too.
Yeah, they're highly fallible people. And they're like, okay, how can we, make this kind of code that works? And you see, examples, the 10 Commandments, for example. I mean, that's not really... I mean, some of those are good ideas, but...
As George Carlin says, you basically put it down into one commandment of, don't be a dick.
Yeah, something like that. And basically everybody agrees with the not killing and not lying or.
I would like if they had made sure to put more of an effort to say the difference between murder and killing. Mm-hmm. Thou shalt not, like murder versus thou shalt not kill.
Yeah.
It's okay, self-defense. Oh, geez, I stabbed you in the heart. On the other hand, it's like I spent 4 years planning your demise. Well, that's breaking one of the commandments. But geez, I had to protect myself on the battlefield, or you jumped out and I accidentally stabbed you in the heart. Don't worry, you don't go to hell for that. That's not actually breaking a commandment. Yeah. The Hebrew words are very different in meaning, and I would have liked to maybe made more of an effort in the translation to make the notation there. Yeah, thou shalt not premeditate murder.
Interestingly, there are Hindu and Buddhist traditions, and usually monks and people who take a vow and stuff, that they literally take I will not take life or something. They say I vow never to take a life. They take that so literally they won't kill a fly.
Which has got to be so annoying around mosquitoes. Because my reflexes are just ready to smack anywhere near around my body.
I wonder how many mosquitoes there are in ancient India. Probably plenty.
Probably a decent amount. Yeah.
It's a tropical area. So
all you need is some stagnant water, and there's a source for it.
Yeah.
But that's taking things to an end where I don't care how close you are to reaching nirvana. You are so ready to break that just to get rid of that dang mosquito. It's like their very humming is designed to make you angry and want to smack them.
Yeah.
That might have a genetic factor for it, by the way, because I suppose if you're not smacking them, you're more susceptible to diseases. So the people that have the response to smack a mosquito have more kids, and so it winds up becoming a more prevalent gene in the gene pool. So you can make a good argument for it being an evolutionary factor.
Yeah. These
poor guys have to fight evolution to hit nirvana. Wow.
Speaking of codes, though, as an occasional dungeon master, I sort of think of myself as following a code of, the rules, or the rules of Dungeons and Dragons, or whatever system I happen to be running, and that is very codified. But at the same time, I have this sense of my judgment as a DM has to be able to override, has to be able to decide, well, in this case, I'm going to ignore the rules. So it's more judgment than rules.
That's why I do like some of the stuff that's put in explicitly under the tri-stat system. It's you roll a die when it will increase the fun. You don't roll when it's not going to make things fun.
Okay.
And the GM has final judgment on everything, of course, but you got to try and keep things fair. Yeah. You don't got to try and show the impartiality.
Yeah, well, as a DM, I think it's important to keep an eye on, making sure the players are having fun, but at the same time, as far as any rulings go, I usually prefer to, if I can stick with the rules, I will, because I feel like I would rather have that hurdle to overcome. If the players, something bad happens to the players, and that's not fun to have bad stuff happen to you. Well, I think ultimately in the long run, having bad stuff happen to your characters is fun because,
Mind you, I do recall playing underneath you in some campaigns and trying very hard to see how badly I could max out one particular rule set, like jumping. So I had a character who could move fast and had max skills and ranks in jumping and the ring for it, and he wound up jumping so far, according to the rules, it took him 3 rounds before he landed. So it's what do I do in the air? Am I allowed to fire off crossbows or anything while I'm going through there? Because I'm basically a moving projectile at this point. I don't need to keep moving as I'm jumping. I'm airborne.
Okay. Well, I don't.
So I think we had to house rule something on that. Cause it's I don't need to pay attention where I am as long as they're in the general direction towards where I'm going. Can I fire off some bows as I'm spending this round of transit? I think you allowed it. But only during the rounds where I was completely moving throughout it. When I was jumping up and landing, all standard rules applied. But because I had a jump rank high enough, and I was going far enough. I was spending literally entire rounds without touching the earth. I was as close to flying as a barely magic person could be.
So I was thinking, I don't think that qualifies me as chaotic, as in terms of alignment. If you were to say, lawful versus chaos, I think I stick to the rules a lot, but also like allow room for judgment. But I think that makes me mostly lawful.
Lawful with maybe a neutral end of things. Because, I mean, let's face it, you are trying to tell a story here.
Yes, yeah.
In which case, sometimes the story requires a bit more of a cinematic scene than the rules would normally allow.
Yeah, yeah.
That's it. I mean, that was the other thing I wanted to talk about. The whole D&D system of alignment is basically a code of rules.
Yeah.
What you can and can't do, what you're expected to follow.
Well, I've always thought that the fact that it's a 3x3 grid always felt a little bit lawful in itself to me.
Yeah. One more argument I have for the D&D universe being inherently lawful is the entire morality systems in a grid. The outer planes, especially the chaotic ones, still follow the pattern of where they are.
Well, except that I take a little bit from the Planescape mythology in that maybe what we're seeing, the model that we're seeing, is just one way of perceiving the cosmos, which maybe happened to be written up by a lawful person. But if a chaotic person came along and wrote up their own, model of the universe, it would look multiverse, it would look very different. Or even every different chaotic person would come up with a different view of.
Which is why it's so hard to get that persistent chaotic view in there, because one, they're less likely to write a rule of system for how the morality works, because they're chaotic. And two, because there's so many differing views, it's like, we can't reach consensus. Well, welcome to chaos.
Yeah, so that's why the lawful one ends up in the books that we read.
But here's the thing, according to the Planescape setting, if you get enough people believing it, it starts becoming true.
Well,
so in which case, would it be that the planes are in their Great Wheel format, and the morality's in its 3x3 grid, because they got enough people to believe in it being that way?
Possibly, but also here's the other thing, though, is sometimes the planes of chaos are described as being much larger and more ponderous than the planes of law, and it's just the fact that...
Yeah, there's 666 layers of the abyss, but good luck finding anything more than 7 for the lawful areas, and that's like the Mount Celestia.
Yeah, and just the fact that the lawful section of the multiverse is held together by such, pure will of all the lawful people, that it's able to hold its own versus this overwhelming sea of chaos that's on the other side, or, spilling everywhere.
That's everywhere except for their little zone of control.
Yeah. I mean, that's the other thing. You can turn the multiverse around in various directions. You can say, it's all defined by law if you're a lawful kind of thinker. And you can say, everybody's in their little box and stuff. Or you can, look at it in a different angle, and it's like, no, because the chaos is the main thing. So that's what I like about that whole. I don't know. There's so many different ways to look at it, I guess.
Well, that's the thing too is that because we have it in this system, this code of morality in D&D. It's like some people it's all boxed in. It's like a straitjacket. I'm not allowed to do what I want as a player. Other people say it's like no, it's not supposed to be like that. It's more of a general guideline. Yeah. Whereas we've come up with just now, not just now, but as we've described it just now.
Yeah.
It's a system whereby a story comes out of that. We utilize it as a tool to explain the universe and how other systems may wind up going. I know, for instance, you had an interesting concept of grouping certain bases of alignment into sort of overarching alignment constructs.
Yeah.
For infernal for any type of evil, or and all types of chaos, and go through entire ends of the spectrum into 4 other groups.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was a very interesting thing to work with, I believe, as well. And I found that quite intriguing. Don't know how it would have to work from a rules context. Might require a feat to work for 3rd edition, but whatever.
Well, okay, a feat to have a different.
Because of what it to have this overarching I cover for 3 alignments, sort of thing. Yeah. So because you could I'm acting all lawful evil, and someone casts, circle of protection law, and you go, no, I'm chaotic, and then you walk right through it without damage. So that sort of thing is an interesting advantage according to the system. So it might require a feat, or maybe just drop an ability point by an ability score by 2 points, sort of thing, to pay for that. Depends on how deep and how heavy of the alignment system is going to wind up working for you.
Sure.
If it's a really big thing, spend the feat. If it's only a minor thing, everyone's casting these magic circles. Yeah, no one really casts them. They're small things, small potato. Happens infrequently. Just drop 2 points on your stats somewhere.
Yeah, it could work.
And it would bring back some very interesting things about the half giants from the Dark Sun campaign too. That would be pretty awesome. But that's just me thinking out loud on that one.
No, that's
because that's how they worked. Is they in second edition they had like, oh boy, you've got one fastened access and one chaotic one, so you'd roll randomly every day you wake up.
Oh yeah.
So it's like I'm always lawful, and then it's like okay, and you're like rolled a 4. I'm lawful neutral today. And tomorrow you wake up lawful evil. The day after that you wake up lawful good. Just how the dice roll.
Mm-hmm.
Or sometimes it's like I'm always, I'm always. Like I'm always good, but sometimes I'm lawful good, sometimes I'm chaotic good. So you have a lot of variation in that, and that would be nice to see that get some rules prominence in the game system, I think. So I encourage you to write that up as a 5th edition rule supplement and put it out for the internet and gain notoriety.
You'd probably do something like that. So when you are there any actual published sort of either paladin codes or another code of conduct for other things for role-playing games? Have people done that?
Alternative style for D&Ds?
Well, because I don't remember in any of the player's handbook a list of 10. These are the 10 items on the Paladin's code that the Paladin must do.
Oh, that was 2nd edition. It's like you can only have so many items, and it has to be one of this, one of that. That was all in the 2nd edition player's handbook, in the code. Actually, it listed out there.
It does list the Paladin's code, but I think they dropped it in later editions.
They dropped it, and then they picked it up, polished it, and relaxed it a little bit where it needed to be.
I think it just says something like a Paladin, it's just a paragraph.
Well, if you look at 5th edition stuff,
it's
not necessarily for that. For the the green Paladin that they've got in 5th edition, you always have to celebrate the joy of life and all the greatness of all the life in existence, because you're the green paladin. Then if you start becoming grim and dour, then what are you fighting for? I mean, you're the Fey Lord that empowers you. For your powers is you've got to obey and respect what it means to be like him. Otherwise, you've become like the enemy. And so that's a very interesting thing. Whereas the White Knight Paladin has to help out even to the point of where it will break their back. They have to keep trying to help out as many people as possible. Whereas we'll go with the Grim Avenger and the Black Paladin. Mm-hmm. He's got to swear an oath of vengeance, and so for him, that's the only thing that really follows. Is I have got to go to the end, even to the point where it'll break his back. He has to follow that guy and punish him. So they split it up very interestingly. So there's no one paladin covering everything, and they're allowed to interact with. I mean, they don't even have to be the lawful good alignment anymore. It's here's the alignment you're going to try and strive for. You don't have to always meet it. It can be a work in progress. You can still try and be the aspiring paladin and keep your powers. And I really dig that, because that allows for character progression and character growth. In the old edition, you start off level 1 paladin. This is what you're like. Level 20, this is a paladin. This is still what you're like, just with more powers and hit points.
Okay, yeah.
So this one does allow for that personal growth and better storytelling, I believe. I love Gygax, and I love all the stuff, but I believe this actually lends itself in 5th edition to better storytelling purposes.
Yeah. Well, so, just curious, you were mentioning about the comics code. You thought there was some sort of pros to it?
I see that. I see some pros and I see some cons to it. On the one hand, it's dude, you can't show corrupt cops. How do you get Batman being a really good vigilante that way if, the cops should be able to do all his work?
Yeah.
And on the other hand, it's well, you can't tell any stories about vampires, or werewolves. There's some good storytelling potential going on there. Just because they're mythological, nasty beasties, you can't put that in. Come on, guys, you're really, tying out there. I have a suspicion that at least some of them were meant specifically at certain publishers that got the ire of the people that were doing their moral crusade. So they targeted particularly heavy. Again, Max Gaines is one very notable example. He lost almost all of his published works when the CCA came in. He went down to just Mad Magazine. Not that Mad Magazine was any bad. It wound up becoming a great, great thing when he focused solely on that. But he had a whole body of criminal fiction work. People with karmic comeuppance and horrible, crazy things happening and very gory stuff. Not for kids. But apparently no one realized you could have comics that weren't meant just for kids.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Well, so do you think, as a parallel to the Paladin thing, maybe if they did something here's an ideal that you could strive for as far as a comic book code, and say,
So you'd be ranking it. So this is Comic Code Gold. This is Comic Code Silver. This is Comic Code Bronze.
Yeah, maybe.
This is Comic Code Uranium for the stuff that completely violates everything. Oh, it's nasty.
Yeah.
I would like that. That said, I think it'd be easier just to keep it in with like what they have for TV ratings these days.
Yeah.
I can see that not working quite so well with the paladins, though. When you go back, it's like paladins should always be striving for that highest possible ideal, and so like the paladin rating should always try and get at that, like where it should be. So call it like 10 out of 10 in that case, and like where your paladin is actually making it, like 8 out of 10 and all that. In which case, I wouldn't mind seeing them adopt some rules from the World of Darkness, where you had your general paths and you had your score rankings depending on how far you were along the road or the path that you were on. The more primal and bestial you were on the standard road, the lower your score was. The closer you were to becoming like an unliving saint, the higher up you were. I would really dig seeing something like that with paladins, and whereby like if you have like a score of 5 or higher, you gain this effect. Whereas if you're fairly low or not high enough, you gain a lesser effect. And if you're beneath this, like you're at score 3 or 0, you have no ability to use this. So in which case you could have the paladin always trying higher and always doing good. And if they do good enough, they get rewarded by getting their powers at full strength or even super strength. If they hit 10 out of 10, it's like automatic max turning effect.
Yeah.
But that only applies once per storyline or something. Don't overpower it.
Sure. Yeah.
So in which case I would really dig to see something like that.
Another question, like, how would you compare sort of the D&D paladin and his ideals to I don't want to say just Superman, but probably but basically the comic book superhero.
Let's go Captain America. He seems like a good version of that.
Yeah, how are they different? Like, how is a paladin different from a superhero?
Paladins are allowed to kill. The weird fun thing about the D&D's cosmology is killing an evil creature is a good act because it reduces the amount of evil in the thing.
Yeah.
Like I said, if it's an evil creature that cries for mercy, so parlay and all that stuff. No. Okay, you're on a higher code of conduct here. You can't just kill everyone. I believe killing infants is out of there too. So just because it's like an orc baby doesn't mean you're allowed to stab it like crazy. That's kind of a horrible act, buddy.
Yeah. Okay.
But demons. Oh yeah, you can slay all the demons you want. Superman and Captain America really don't kill.
But if they did, they wouldn't face consequences.
There's social consequences.
Internal consequences. Well,
no one's going to want to be around the Superman who's killing his foes because it's like, what if I'm not good enough? What if Jimmy Olsen isn't being friendly enough? He's not enough Superman's friend. He's had enough. Like, I'm tired of being yanked around with you as my chain, Jimmy Olsen. Boom! Laser eyes! Jimmy Olsen's head is now a smoking crater.
Well,
whoa!
I think there's some space in between
But that's the fear people have when Superman starts doing that sort of thing.
If Superman only kills bad guys, then that's not too different from sort of.
But Superman's pretty darn good. Superman's Superman has patience that I do not have. He is a so much better person than me. What if I don't get deemed as good enough? What if I get deemed as just a really petty villain in his superheroic eyes? So if Superman starts killing, people start wondering, am I good enough? Am I going to make the cut? Because if you don't make the cut against Superman, that's a deep cut. That is like I got thrown into orbit cut.
Yeah,
you could really make it hurt.
I wouldn't worry about that because
that's the worry everyone always seems to have as soon as Superman starts doing stuff like that. Which is why I think the Phantom Zone was an inevitable thing for the Superman progression, which came about 1965. So it was in the golden age of comics as well. And in which case, like, Superman can't kill. He's Superman. So what do you do when you get, like, another Kryptonian that's like, dude, like, no prison on Earth is going to hold him. He's Kryptonian. Like, how are you going to stop him? And in which case, it's like, I have a way to stop him where he cannot hurt anyone. Phantom Zone projector. Now he's a ghost. But I didn't kill him. I just put him somewhere where he can't hurt anyone ever again. In which case, yeah, I think the Phantom Zone whole concept is an inevitability from the comic code that wound up telling some very good stories over the years. Because it kept Superman from going down like, well, Superman can't kill, So it's like, oh, he has to find some way to get, rid of these horrible superpowered villains that no prison on Earth will ever be able to handle. So I really like that. They did try something similar to that in Marvel recently, where they put a bunch of criminals into the negative zone. They had a big prison there, so it's like, oh, you bust out, congratulations, you're in a dying universe. Where are you gonna go, buddy? It did not end well. Maybe because it wasn't part of the Silver Age, where it came about. Also, villains, are intrinsically entertaining, so you got to get them out and about, back into circulation if you want the heroes to fight them again. So,
do today's comics, like now that there isn't a comics code, do you think they're more free to comment on society, or do you think comics are just goofy and always?
Some of the best early breaks from the Comic Code Authority were very deep, powerful stories, like Green Arrow's sidekick Speedy getting addicted to heroin. A very good look at the realism and the humanization of these heroin addicts. It created just a load of sympathy for the heroin addict by presenting it as like even a regular person can fall and they're still a person even if they're on heroin. So that person you see that is clearly on smack and laying down in a gutter, that's not just somebody, like subhuman filth. That's another person. Think about that, man. That could have been a superhero sidekick, that young man in the gutter. And so, and that one was published without the Comic Code approval because it showed use of drugs, very blatantly use of drugs. So, mind you, on the one hand, it's like, oh boy, that was a really good story. On the other hand, that's what most people remember Speedy for, is doing drugs. So, like things went downhill for Speedy after that. I mean, sure, he got off that as a smack. He's no longer heroin. Okay, he relapses every once in a while, but. I mean, since then, he's lost his arm. It's come back as, like a cyber prosthetic. He's gotten, relapses with heroin. He's had an affair with a super villainous Cheshire, and has a kid from that. But he's not exactly a good dad. He's not he's breaking the Comic Code Authority because they're not showing marriage and the sanctity thereof, and he's not raising the child properly as a good man from the 50s and 60s should, Right. And so, I hate to say it, but, because there's no Comic Code Authority to capture Speedy from this sort of, thing from constantly happening to him, he's become, the butt monkey of the universe. Horrible things keep happening to him. Why? Well, there's that serious story where it broke the Comic Code Authority about him using drugs. So if anyone's going to, do something that, doesn't mesh with the Comic Code Authority, it's probably going to happen to Speedy. Which seems to be the line of thought, which is kind of sad, but it happens.
Yeah, that sounds sad, yeah.
Yeah, whereas if there was that comic code to catch him and say, no, you guys can't do that all the time to him. Come on, you want to get our approval on this, don't you? In which case, maybe you don't chop his arm off. Maybe Cheshire reforms. Some of the best, heroes that I've liked throughout the comic series have been initially portrayed as villains. Rogue was not always, just the happy-go-lucky Southern belle from the X-Men. She started off as a villain. And that happens for a number of them, like Gambit started that way too as the villain. There is no hero so celebrated as the rehabilitated, as one song goes. And so, Cheshire could have made for a good reformed, villain into a hero. They could have had, be a superhero family. It's worked very well for Green Arrow and the Black Canary. Poor Speedy hasn't had that opportunity because, he's not under that safety net for the comic code. He could have been, they could have started a whole concept of the family type superhero. There's your Green Arrow, and he's got the Black Canary, and they've got their little family going on. And there's Speedy, his sidekick, and he's got his wife Cheshire, and they've got their daughter all together. And oh boy, isn't that nice to see a crime fighting series of families all together. It could be very well done, but poor Speedy just winds up being the speed bump over the bad news boss. And so he just keeps getting hit by the whole thing. It's like, oh, lost your arm. Oh, you lost control of your kid. Oh. And so I can really see the purpose of the Comic Code Authority saving the characters from bad storylines. One more day would not have happened under the Comic Code Authority. And that's one of the Spider-Man gives up his marriage. It gets null and void. It never happened. So that Aunt May can come back to life. Neron takes it and says, oh boy, in exchange for your marriage having never existed, May comes back to life as a 92-year-old lady. I'm sure she'll live forever. What a great choice you made, Peter. But no, because that could be effectively interpreted as divorce, which is very much prohibited and frowned upon in the Comic Code Authority, it wouldn't have happened. one of the horrible stories of Spider-Man wouldn't have existed because of the CCA. So I see very, good reasons for some of it and very bad reasons for some of it. In the end, I would like a revised system, graded system, ranking thing going on. But I would like to see something back, and that's my final word on the thing. Is like I would like to see it back in some form, some degree, some method. Revised, of course. I don't think vampires have to go just because they're vampires. I think that's like chopping off your arm. You just you're not as much with that limitation.
Right. Well, I wouldn't. What do I want? I just want. I think
want good stories to happen. I want good heroes. Please give them to me.
Okay, I don't think a comic code is going to affect a story either way. I think there's ways to write around it if it is in place, but I don't think it's necessarily going to give us better stories.
If it could prevent bad stories from happening, I would love to see that pop in somehow.
I don't think that's even possible, the no bad stories code.
Or at least minimize bad stories. Like, here are some topics that most people don't even talk about, right? So avoid this, don't do this. Present this in such a light as to do that, da-da-da-da. And so, yay, consequences for bad actions. You can't just have something bad happen to a person and then everyone ignores it forever. That's because it trivializes, like, a bad thing that happens. Like if they had telling a story for Speedy, he got his arm cut off. Oh no! Now he's got to go through like a story arc where it's what it's like to be a one-armed archer. Like you can admit that's probably not going to be fairly easy to do, to be a proficient archer with only one arm. And then he shows up later with his arm back. That's kind of an insult to the people that have to spend the rest of their lives because they've lost an arm without it doesn't grow back for regular people in the real world, and so it trivializes the loss of the arm. In which case, you got to treat these things with a proper respect. I wouldn't mind seeing that happen. As part of the code, it's like, okay, you can have this happen, but you got to follow through on it. You can't just go back and say, oh yes, and then he got injected with radioactive, reptilian DNA, and his arm pops back in. No hard feelings, nothing, bad happens to him permanently. Yeah, he goes off being happy-go-lucky forever.
Well, I wouldn't mind if there was sort of like almost a voluntary.
Well, mind you, the CCA was voluntary. That's why eventually it got dropped without much hassle. So they said, okay, we're just not going to be publishing under the CCA authority.
Yeah.
On we go.
Well, but I'm saying like a voluntary thing that you could follow, that you, like a
contract
with the morals of the story kind of thing, like here's moral lessons in, more of a how-to guide than a stamp or anything like that.
A damning standard.
Just
like if you do follow it, congratulations, gold stamp. Just like that, then?
Well, no, I was saying not even a stamp. Just somebody somewhere could publish, a guide to writing moral stories and just publish that. And that could
but
be
not everyone's going to follow that sort of thing,
yeah.
Sadly, and that's the downside. Sometimes you have to try and enforce somebody to live up to those standards,
or don't enforce it.
Just don't approve if they don't meet the standards. So in which case it's like, okay, it's a decent story, but it doesn't meet our standards on this, so we can't give it, that stamp or this rating.
I wouldn't. I mean, if you want, but
well, let's face it, CSI is a very good series in almost any incarnation you watch it. But because it shows how crimes are progressed, it would not, if it was in comic book format, meet the CCA requirements because it says you can't show the details of a crime.
Yeah.
And so, if CSI had been a comic book, it would not have gotten the approval. It would not have gotten the CCA, stamp on there. But that doesn't mean it's a bad series. It's a very good series. Very good stories have come out of it. Very good characters have come out of it. So, maybe it should just be that, okay, congratulations, you managed to meet these high-end requirements. We shall reward you with the stamp. Rather than, we will withhold it because you didn't do good enough. You have to make it a positive thing rather than punishment for not having it.
Possibly, yeah. But, I wouldn't... I think I'm okay with the video game system that we have now that has a little bullet list of, it has swearing, it has violence, it has, this and that. Partial
nudity, consumption of alcohol, online rating, not yet,
Yeah, that sort of thing. But I don't think you can. I don't think there's time for some board to be set up to read the comic and say, okay, what is this? Being basically literary critics and saying, what is this comic's message to people? and like how exactly are they portraying divorce or this or drugs or whatever to make the exact correct. Because like I mean, kind of what I guess
there's a lot of comics out every month, and some of them are weekly. You know, it's like, oh my goodness, that's a lot to put out.
And it sounds like you might be okay with depicting drugs in a comic if it's as long as the drugs are shown as being negative or something like that, or like
or at least an allegory for drug use. In which case you might be able to make it work with a longer running character.
Yeah.
Like, oh no, Magneto's getting souped up by Fabian Cortez's mutant abilities to recharge your abilities, and that's effectively like a drug use symbolism. So that way you don't have to worry about ruining the character on drug use as a permanent thing, whereas you can still tell a tale where the Fabian Cortez, which is an actual character from the stuff, and that's what he was actually doing for Magneto, was effectively like stimulating him with drugs. So you can tell the story without it permanently altering the character by doing it through allegory. So there's some interesting, fun things to do.
Yeah, but yeah, that's the thing. Like, I wouldn't have like basically a panel of readers to submit every comic to and say, okay, well, how are they doing the allegory and. You know,
that is a pretty heavy amount of extra. Like, on the other hand, if it creates jobs, maybe you can get like a grant from the government on it. You just do it all in house. Before it winds up getting published, you got to have like somebody read through and check off, does it meet these requirements? Give it this rating, and put that on the front cover, and off it goes to the printers.
And there's also, there's nothing to stop like basically review sites. Like somebody.
That's one of the best things about Scan Dailies is just showing like, it has this, this, and this, and here's where it shows this.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
But like you could set up a blog. Somebody could be like, have a blog and review comment. There are a bunch of review sites already, but they mainly just review based on
what happened.
Is it good or bad, or did they like it, or was it a good story? And actually, some of those reviewers will also comment on taste. Matters of like,
I found this to be presented in very good taste. This was excellently done. Yeah. This hit all the requirements, and I really found that the writer knew the subject with the proper delicacy it deserved.
And then when you do like basically like collections or trade paperbacks or whatever, sometimes you can put like a blurb,
the forward of it. This is
forward,
so says,
or even just a tagline on the back, like this review site said it was good, or 10 out of 10 or whatever. And then you don't get that if somebody thought it was in poor taste, like some reviewer.
It would not get put on, so you don't get that the cover blurb.
Yeah. So I think that's basic. That's kind of what you're asking for already. So.
That said, I would like to see the companies themselves put a little bit more effort into doing the in-house work like they did back during the CCA days.
Okay. Well,
I don't think it's that big. They managed to make it work. Things used to be really hurried and really down to the line from what I've been told from Stan Lee's stories. So, it's a little bit more roomy now. They demand you get things done, sent in by this time, so, so I can print out proper and make any changes we need at last minute. So I wouldn't mind them having, like, a person, like the editor, the chief sort of thing. It's like, okay, we need an assistant to, how about you just focus on this stuff. Make sure it meets these requirements, and that's your job. Someone's going to enjoy doing that. And it's like, oh boy, I get to read comics for a living, and then, I got to tick them off as I'm going.
Well, I would do that job. But
so there you go. If you could get that, and that creates a few extra jobs in the industry. And you know what? Everyone's looking for a way to get in. Not a bad way to go about it. You might wind up making some nasty enemies, though. Just as a warning, if that ever comes up, you might want to be careful about who you keep, poo-pooing there.
It's not something I feel that I need from comics. I don't like. If I like a comic, I'll just keep reading it. If I find something I really find distasteful or don't like, I'll stop reading it. Personally, I don't really have much of a line. Like, I'll read almost anything. Like, I've seen...
Give it a shot, at least, right?
Yeah, give it a shot. I know there is such thing as, like, really horrible comics, but...
I've seen some nasty ones, both art-wise, story-wise, and all areas in between.
Yeah, but
and I've seen some glorious ones.
Like, I'm not deep enough into the comics world. Usually those comics don't even get to me. Like, because the comics that come to me have usually already been filtered, and like somebody recommended them or something like that.
Like how I keep telling you, you gotta borrow my copy of Watchmen.
I haven't. Yeah.
One day I'll make sure you get a hold of it and read it. You will be enlightened. It will be awesome.
Oh, we have been going for a while.
Yes.
I should mention our social media.
Yes. If people have like recommended comics, or if there is a system out there whereby people are rating this sort of thing, let us know. Send this in. We'll get the word out to everyone else. But the fact is, we just don't know, and there isn't something that's like so omnipresent for this, like rating or grading system. Means that it does need to get out there. So if you know, let us know, so we'll let others know.
Sure, yeah, we can do that. You can send us email, thesimulationist@gmail.com, and you can make Facebook comments on our Facebook page, facebook.com/thesimulationist. You can also comment on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/thesimulationist. So you're noticing a theme here, all the same things.
Search engine Simulationist. You'll find us.
Yeah, you'll find us. Please also...
you might also want to try Spaceboot1, because you can find the
yes,
Twitter.
you can find my Twitter account at Spaceboot1.
That's numeral 1.
Numeral 1, Spaceboot numeral 1 on Twitter. And, if you have a friend who's into, all the things we talk about. I mean, we talk about so many things in this podcast.
If you've had big arguments as about like how the alignment system works and it's too confining, the other guy says, no, it's just a general guideline and all that, and you think they're wrong, let them know. Send them a copy of this this iteration, man.
Comic books, video games, movies, and all kinds of other things.
Pencil and paper games, of course.
Yeah, RPGs. Tell all your friends, tell your grandma, tell your...
Anybody who thinks you think would enjoy or just could use the extra voices for like 2 hours.
Yeah, you'll make us very happy, and you'll be sharing something wonderful with some other people. So.
I won't lie. At this point, you got a lot of plants in your place. You go off to work, just play this thing on repeat for them so that they'll have something to listen to as they're out and about. Plus, with the voices happening while you're out, criminals are less likely to break into your place because they might suspect that there are people inside.
Yep.
That's right. We technically count as an anti-theft mechanism.
That's true.
Under some very rough guidelines.
So should we finish up final thoughts?
I think I have given my final thoughts on that one. There does need to be something in there to help out, especially if you're looking for something. I want to find something good for my daughter. I don't want to wind up having to read every comic around until I find one that matches.
Okay, and I don't personally feel the need for that, but I can see how some people would, so sure, I'm okay with if there was some kind of, just like they have on video games, I'd be fine with a little, listing of content that some people might find objectionable that's easy to find on the comic, so you can just look at it at a glance and say, okay, I would not find this appropriate, or so on and so forth.
I also would not mind a contract with the readers for the various comic companies. You will never see us do this, and that way anybody who winds up writing a story on there has to sign the contract. Even if it's just a little symbolic, it's nice to know, hey, we care that you want to get the best story possible for all the money you're spending on there. And we appreciate that. We're going to make certain, here's the guidelines, and you will not be, finding stuff that violates these tenets because they signed. And if they violate these things and they wind up getting published, then we have every right to boot them for violation of contract.
Yeah, well,
it is nice to know that there be professionals out there with these such, objective standards. It's written out, something you can sign a contract.
If they had, you're talking about a new code. If they came up with a new set of guidelines for storytelling. Yes and no, because like I was saying near the beginning of the episode, or the iteration, what we were talking about. Yes and no, because sometimes the codes can be circumvented in weird ways. So if you have a writer who is following the contract and he's like, yeah, I'll do that, they might find a weird way around it.
In which case, I actually approve of that, because that leads to very interesting characters. You wouldn't have Sauron without that sort of thing. That might make the story worse. It's hard to say if that's actually going to make the story better. Oh, and that's why you only hire the pros to write the story. So then why do you need them to sign a contract? Sometimes they write crazy stuff. I shall reference Frank Miller. Yeah. He does great work sometimes. Other times it's a little crazy. Yeah, but people like it, don't they? Sometimes. So you just get an interesting amount of flack off some of the stuff when it winds up repeating. Okay. Sometimes it's like, this joke didn't need to go 6 issues long. It could have been done as a single shot. Right. But as long as there's cognizant debate on both sides as to whether it was good, what worked, and what didn't work, I think ultimately everyone comes out ahead. Because you're talking about a concept. And that's what we do.
Can you imagine trying to get Frank Miller to sign some kind of contract like that? I don't think that would work.
Yeah. On the other hand, maybe you could advertise it. Frank Miller, the man who won't sign the contract, presents.
Yeah, okay. All right.
A properly done system will always be able to be turned to someone's advantage.
Sure.
That's been a very nice iteration this week.
Yeah, I think we've gone well over time, but I hope you enjoyed spending time with us, and we'll come back again for another discussion.
Another 90 minutes and another 7 days.
Right. I've been Josh Chillick.
I've been Ryan Kirkby.
Send money.